Well, hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Before, I talked about the first Devil May Cry game that was released. Now for today, I want to talk about the next installment in the What? Dude, you gave me the wrong game!
What are you talking about? This is it right here. Look, it's even got Dante and his sword.
Okay, listen, I know you have a bad history with this game, but you can't just pretend that it doesn't exist.
Fine. But what's in it for me?
Well, I'll do whatever you ask of me. Okay.
Devil May Cry 2, truly one of the games of all time. The story is written, the voice acting is voice acted, the graphics are graphic, the bosses are designed, and the gameplay truly plays like a game, making Devil May Cry 2 one of the games ever made.
You know what Devil May Cry 2 is like to me? Imagine if Dante had just gotten off a 12-hour shift and was on his way to pick up some frozen pizzas or something, and then he just got attacked by demons on the way home.
Well everyone, I hope you're all buckled up and ready to get this show started. I am Lars.
And it's me, Rakuyo. I'm also here on YouTube. Very occasionally.
And today we're both here to tell you about Devil May Cry 2.
And why it f***ing sucks!
Firstly, I should start off by mentioning that I first played DMC2 as a kid back on PS2 and once again about a year ago in the HD collection. And it never even once made sense to me what they were trying to do with the story. Nothing is ever explained as to why it's happening, and things aren't ever given suspense or time to be built up. It's seriously just, Dante kills a building, and then he is attacked by a giant monkey, upon which he then proceeds to fight a helicopter.
You know, since you mentioned buildings and helicopters, the funniest thing about this game to me has to be that everything is a demon. Demon people? Check. Demon animals? Check. Demon tanks? Check. Demon helicopters? Well, of course, check.
Demon buildings? F***ing check!
There's a lot of key elements that make DMC2 the disaster that it really is. However, it's important to mention that the game was really cursed long before it even released, so with that being said, let's get into the development process.
After the massive critical acclaim and the overwhelmingly positive reviews that Devil May Cry received upon release in August of 2001,
that's quite big.
with many reviewers praising its innovation in the action gameplay and the visuals and gothic ambience, and its sales which went as high as 2 million copies, and within a year of the game's release, Dante was already an established character, which means...
That is right everybody, for the sequel, Dante from the Devil May Cry series is back!
Though the reception of the first game was very positive for the most part, I feel as though for the sequel, Capcom took a few negative reviews to heart and tried to appeal to them, where the main complaint of the game was its quote-unquote difficulty.
And by took to heart, we mean that they literally sucked out every bit of fun and uniqueness off of the game to try to give a more relaxed and casual approach to the game that requires less skill and timing efforts and more mashing buttons. Kamiya stated that the difficulty of the original Devil May Cry was intentional. It was made like that as a way to push more casual players to think outside the box and go through a more demanding experience. But of course, he was not called to direct DMC2, and thus this set the wheels for the unfortunate chain of events that took place during the development of the game.
The first Devil May Cry was developed and designed completely by Team Little Devils, which was helmed by our Lord and Savior, Hideaki Itsuno. However, just as we said, he didn't quite return for DMC2. Instead, they brought in Team Devil, which was led by the director from Capcom Studio 1, who did work on the original DMC. However, he was quickly changed. The change was due to what Kamiya believes was, and I quote, a lack of consciousness over director's influence on game style, end quote, and an attempt to balance profits due to a company attitude against concentrating major titles in a single division.
In a nutshell, Capcom management were disappointed with the financial performance of Studio 1's output, and Studio 4's Shinji Mikami, who was the designer for the first DMC, had also left the development of the sequel, where he had freedom to work on multiple titles with a bigger team, upon which he assigned Kamiya to work on Beautiful Joe, leaving the development team for Devil May Cry 2 consisting mainly of people who had worked on fighting games, thus struggling heavily in the development process due to their limited knowledge of 3D action games.
By that point, they were 6 months away from the deadline, and that is when a miracle occurred.
In came the final director of the game and the last person they hired to take over things, Hideaki Itsuno, who had just finished working on Capcom vs SNK 2 and had begun to work on Dragon's Dogma, had been hired. And I use the word hired loosely as he was basically forced by upper management who had been disappointed with the current state of the game and saw it as directorless. Itsuno had been asked to reorganize the project in a supplementary role, meaning he had to basically assume leadership and take over everything. and in return, he would go uncredited.
That's right, Itsuno basically came in and took DMC2 and transformed it from an unplayable, broken disaster to a playable mess that's okay, sort of.
And it's not like he had a whole lot of time to work with. Itsuno essentially took Devil May Cry 2 from the broken show that it was in the development process and transformed it into a mediocre yet playable mess. Which is, if you ask me, quite the feat to achieve, considering he had like 6 months to work with. Itsuno did everything he could in his power with the 6 months he had, and while upper management was satisfied, he wasn't, which led him to ask for Devil May Cry 3 to be greenlit before the release of 2.
And thus, Devil May Cry 2 was released on January 25th, 2003. So, starting the game, our boy El Exterminador de Demonios and this girl by the name of Lucia fight off a horde of demons, and then she proceeds to invite him to her homeland. He's just like, okay, cool, why not? And he goes with her. There he meets her mom, and she proceeds to describe the development process of DMC2.
Good grief. They really made a big mess, didn't they?
Lucia's mother tells Dante that a big demon, Argosax the Chaos, is about to be reawakened by this businessman named Arius and his corporation, and asks him to help in taking him down, upon which Dante is just like, okay, sure, why not? And he proceeds to also give her a coin, cause he's...
And so you begin with the gameplay. Where the hell do I start? You know how Devil May Cry 1's combat is like good and fluid and feels satisfying with revolutionary controls and enemy AI? Yeah, let's just take all that away real quick and instead turn DMC2 into a game where you mash the square button a lot. In the first DMC, you had a wide variety of sword combos that you could choose between. They weren't too hard to perform, nor were they too easy. And your guns added to set combos through the means of juggling. In DMC2, Dante doesn't have those combos anymore. He just has a few basic sword swipes that look and feel really stiff to do. I mean, just look at that stinger. It has the reach of 3 centimeters. What's more, there do exist combos similar to that of DMC1. But instead of pausing between presses, you need to move the left stick around. Which means you move the left stick anywhere during the combo, congrats, you just locked yourself to the generic 3-swipe combo. Did I mention this also means you can't redirect yourself in the middle of a combo?
In general, a whole lot of the mechanics that were present in the first game were either completely removed, toned down, or something extremely unnecessary that made the experience much worse was added. For instance, the game locks onto the closest enemy by default, which makes swinging at something specific annoyingly hard to do. For example, a switch. The auto lock is always present, and it's not like it's even helpful in the slightest, considering enemy AI literally does not work and just stands there. Just look at that! Oh, but guess what? There is a way to remove auto lock-on. Know how? By pressing the R2 button. The game doesn't even tell you that! You're just left to figure it out on your own, or in my case, I just pressed the R2 button on my controller by accident and realized that it did that. The only way you could have possibly known that R2 disables that god-awful lock-on even today is if you specifically either searched for it, or back in the day looked at the instruction manual that came with the game.
To be fair, all of this doesn't even matter when you get to the biggest problem of DMC2. The whole reason the game was being called a failed third-person shooter. And it's the fact that Dante's guns are the most overpowered weapons to ever exist in history. So remember how we said that the enemy AI doesn't know what to do with itself and just stands there? Yeah, combine that with how overpowered your guns are, and you have an entire game of just standing there, shooting your guns and occasionally walking like 2 feet when an enemy tries to land a hit on you. Because, oh yeah, enemies stand perfectly still when they attack you, and they have the effective range of my pet snail trying to bite me. It's worth noting that in DMC1, your guns don't juggle or even stun enemies on the ground, and you need to launch them in the air first. Like I said, the guns are rarely stunned.
And also, every single enemy has a little health bar on the bottom left now, so you can just sit there as the auto lock-on shoots everything for you. I am not joking right now. Wanna look at me as I'm playing the game on Switch? Oh, but there is a form of skill expression in this game. There is not a single moment in this game where you have to try, where you have to at least put in a little bit of effort if you want to win. It makes you wonder what the point of all these things you unlock to customize your devil trigger even is.
Yeah, you get these amulets which change and upgrade certain aspects of your devil trigger. These sound really cool until you realize none of them change your moveset or provide interesting interactions. The most you get is like, this one does fire damage, this one makes you go faster underwater, This one makes the game even more slow and boring.
The ranking system from DMC1 also makes a return, however, instead of calling your combo dull, the game tries to gaslight you into thinking that you didn't waste your money on something that can barely qualify as a game. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Let's also talk about the upgrades in this game, which add absolutely nothing and don't make the combat more interesting or add more variety in any way, shape, or form. As opposed to DMC1, where you unlock different weapons with their own movesets throughout the game and you unlock new attacks that serve different purposes using red orbs. In DMC2, the red orbs also serve to upgrade Dante's weapons, but it's done in the most boring way possible, where the attacks are purely damage-based. You don't get to unlock a new weapon with a new moveset and new attacks for said weapon. Instead, you get a different stick with the same moveset but with a little more damage dealt, which in itself is stupid because you already don't use them.
What's left? Majin Devil Trigger? Yeah, you know, when you're on low health and you pop DT, so you get this more powerful DT, which looks cool and all, but remember, this is DMC2. You won't be at low health for the majority of the game. And something tells me this game's devs even forgot it existed, because there's nothing about it in the game, nor the manual, so you tell me.
So, do you want to discuss the story yet?
So, the story. Where do we begin? Well, to give it some praise, they matched Dante's personality to this game perfectly. As in, he has no personality. He just gets told by Lucia one day that they need his help to fight off a demon named Argosax, and he just stands there expressionless, flips a coin and decides to help while the player is supposed to think that this is the coolest shit ever. But he actually just looks like he didn't get enough sleep last night. The reason for this complete personality switch goes back to DMC1 and how Capcom upper management didn't like the quote, joke-cracking wise-ass that Dante was in the first game, and wanted to turn him into more of a stoic hero.
Like, imagine not being able to read the room this f***ing badly.
Wait, didn't you leave? When did you come back?
Like, why does he even have this coin? When did he get it? Why did he decide his whole morality should depend on the flip of a coin? Wait. Later, it turns out the coin has heads on both sides. What the f*** is the whole point of that plot point? Dante, are you too tired? Do you need me to get you like a Papa John's meat lovers?
I think the funniest part of his personality changing in this game is the absurd reasoning for it, which is just, oh yeah, they didn't like how he was in the previous game, when you had a lore-accurate reason you could have used right there. And it's the fact that he grew depressed after he killed Virgil and was left alone. But no, instead it's just, heroic.
Anyway, after Dante and Lucia reach the village, he does his stupid coin flip thing again when Lucia's mother asks him to find the arcanas that Arius is trying to release Argosax with. She teases that there's a story about Sparta she wants to tell Dante, but he just fucks off before she can say anything. He goes walking around the most beige level design known to man with enemies that can barely even hurt him. And he comes across a giant gorilla and recreates the tragic events that occurred in the Cincinnati Zoo on May 28, 2016. He then finds a motorcycle, and as any Oscar award-winning story goes, he finds an infested demon tank. This is also the most mechanically engaging boss in the whole game.
Oh, but I think the next boss really takes the cake for engaging enemy design. So, right after that visceral action, Dante jumps off the building as it turns into a giant demonic building creature. Wow, this is some really impressive stuff. Really interested in how many interesting ideas they can get from this concept. What do you think? Right after all that happens, Lucia just happens to see another helicopter and somehow knows it's Arius' chopper. She goes to where the chopper lands and confronts him, and this is where we find out that the main villain of the game is J. Jonah Jameson.
Oh yeah, remember his iconic line from Spider-Man 2?
I was going to be the king!
This is where he reveals that she's an artificial demon and one of many. She was also a defect and was abandoned and raised by that old lady from the start. I think I should also add that Lucia constantly sounds like she's on the brink of tears in all her lines. She tries to kill him, but he is just too unbothered.
Believe you.
He explains his whole plot to her so that the player actually understands where the fuck the story is going, before using his forced lightning he just made up to push her into the next level. This is where Dante finds Arius, and instead of doing or saying something of note, he just lets him go while he summons a random bull demon to fight Dante, like we're playing Crisis Core.
While Dante is too busy shooting the bull to death, Lucia is f***ing around, fighting some big-ass fish in your favorite cliché, Lars, the water level.
I'm not in the mood for this right now.
Yeah, sounds about right. Afterwards, they find their way into Ouroboros tower, and she gives him the last arcana. He goes up some stairs and finds Lucia's mother just standing there. How the fuck did she make it up here? Did you take an Uber? Apparently Lucia went to face Arius again. Good choice, because when you can't even touch the man you're trying to kill, the only logical choice is to try again and get kidnapped, because that's exactly what happens to Lucia. So Dante pulls out the fucking coin again just to piss me off even more, and decides to go save her. At this point, I'm just way too checked out of the story, man. I'll hand it over to Lars, who I think just got over his trauma of water levels.
Dante finds Arius and a captured Lucia and decides to trade the Arcanas for Lucia. After one of the worst trade deals in the history of trade deals maybe ever, Dante decides to kill Arius. My boy, why didn't you just fucking kill him first? Even after giving them to him, he still holds her hostage, and Dante tries to kill him anyway? Lucia says exactly what I just said about killing Arius. And Dante decides, yeah, sure, let me just drop you off at your mother first, because if he did things logically, there wouldn't be any stakes. Dante ends up fighting Phantom from DMC1. Somehow he didn't die and is just here and no one questions it. He's just shoehorned in there. He somehow ends up in a weird abstract plane of existence with 3 giant heads that shoot magic at him. I want to point out that in this boss fight, you literally cannot use your sword and your only option is shooting it to death. It might have started off as a joke, but now this game really is just a third-person shooter. He then finds Arius, who is about to start the ritual, but it turns out that Dante actually replaced one of the Arcanas with his coin. So, Dante shoots J. Jonah Jameson as he just stands there occasionally throwing magic at you, and after defeating him, he then says his iconic line once again.
I was going to be the king!
This is also the one scene in the game where Dante acts remotely like Dante.
King? Yeah. Here's your crown.
So then Lucia walks in and she tries to force Dante to kill her, but he just doesn't say anything because that one-liner from earlier was just as much as the team at Capcom could muster. But uh-oh, somehow that ritual that didn't work, works. Yeah, I don't know either, but just go with it. Dante goes to kill Ballsacks in the demon world, and Lucia tells him not to, but he fucking flips the fucking coin again, and just says, whoops, I guess I gotta go kill the final boss. He throws her the coin because Itsuno finally joined the team and told him to get rid of that shit, probably. And finally, we get a good boss fight in this game. But not before we fight Orgosax in the most underwhelming first phase where he's just a blob of random assets from the game put together.
Argosax then transforms into this strange demonic angel-type creature with sun-shaped wings. And this is the boss fight we mentioned earlier. This is the one part of the game where you can actually enjoy a somewhat well-designed boss fight and you don't just lay back and hold square. Argosax's second phase, or the Despair Embodied, if you will, starts out the fight by walking towards you menacingly. He has a variety of attacks such as fiery projectile rain, fireballs, and his own stinger. The fight for the most part is well designed, and a big part of that is because it's probably the one boss fight in the game where you fight something at least slightly humanoid, and not a fucking chopper. Although on the easier difficulties, it's still relatively easy, you may find something of a decent challenge in some of the later difficulties. Dante charges him and gets his sword and himself knocked out of sight. However, he reappears and aims his gun towards Argosax. As he looks down and not at him because he's an edgy edgelord, he charges up one final lightning-infused bullet. Don't know where that came from. However, he shoots Argosax into the abyss, ending his reign of terror. Which just started like 10 minutes ago. A motorcycle then mysteriously appears as Dante gets on it. He gives us the closing line of the game as he rides off.
Yeah. Let's go all the way to hell.
Lucia is then seen waiting for him in his shop, and just as it seems hopeless, the sound of a roaring motorcycle is heard outside the shop. Lucia is then literally never seen again in any one of the games. So, since that's it for DMC2, you down to cover some of the few positives that are in it?
You're telling me it has positives?
Come on, man, you know there's at least a few.
Fine, let's see here.
Well, for one, Dante's outfit design is one of my favorites. That red coat going down covered with the dark vest, I think fits Dante's more depressed and brooding mood in this game.
This is also the first time we see Rebellion, Dante's iconic sword, featured in a Devil May Cry game. Although it was a bit strange, it was introduced in DMC 2 and not 3. I feel like it fits 3's themes more. But hey, at least that's a positive.
This is also the first game to give us the Bloody Palace mode, which became a staple of the series from here on out.
Beating the game on hard mode, taxing as it may sound, also unlocks Trish as a playable character who plays like DMC1 Dante, so you could say Trish is good mode DMC2. Well, I think that just about does it for the positives.
In conclusion, DMC2 really was a flawed game, but I think the one element that we should all appreciate in this is Itsuno basically taking the game from being a complete and utter disaster and turning it into a somewhat playable game. And of course, the many downsides of this game also would go on to motivate him to make Devil May Cry 3, which reignited the love of fans for the series and cemented its legacy among the greats.
Yeah, I think if we can take away at least one good thing from this game, it's that without Itsuno's involvement, this series would have been dead in the water ages ago.
But Devil May Cry 2 itself as a game is a bit of a skid mark in the series' legacy. With the downright horrendous combat, the dumbass enemy AI, the uninspired bosses, and of course the mediocre story that adds absolutely nothing to the overall story of Dante. The game was, simply put, lacking serious passion and motivation. I mean, just look at the enemy files and compare them to DMC1. Sargassos, they hide between the edges of the sea and the underworld. They wait on stray wanderers and feast on them. The spirits of the victims are destined to wander the endless sea of the underworld.
Brontmancer, an evil entity that attacks opponents randomly.
Erupt Gel, the slow-class demon that drifts underwater looks like a jellyfish.
Alright, well that wraps it up for Devil May Cry 2. Thanks for joining me, Rakuyo. So, what is it that you wanted me to do?
So, was it worth it?
Hey there, thanks so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed the video as much as we enjoyed working on it.
Dude, we played Devil May Cry 2. What do you mean, enjoy?
Yeah, anyways, if you did enjoy, make sure to subscribe and leave a like. And also subscribe to Rakuyo, his channel link will be in the description.
Yeah, come on in. I upload like once every couple of years. And just for the record, I did not force Lars to cut his hair. He wanted to cut it himself and we had the idea to make a joke for this video. Please, don't kill me.